Man, we're in this series, Happily Ever After. If you missed last week, I encourage you to, I believe they have it online somewhere, and go back and watch it. Last week we talked about how we're completely incompatible. In marriages, we're completely incompatible, just period. Men and women, created different, wired different, programmed different. It's just, we're completely incompatible, but we also learned that our incompatibility should never lead to irreconcilable differences if you bring Jesus and the gospel into your marriage. We're doing this series specifically for issues in marriages. Like, we're just going to be honest, and we're digging in. And today what I want to do is just give you some practical advice. So I hope you're paying attention. I hope you're taking notes. If you're not married, hopefully, maybe you'll be married one of these days. And you can take this advice into your marriage. It will help you go a long ways, because if you're married for any amount of time, eventually you're going to have bumps in the road. And if you, I believe that if you say, my marriage is perfect, we don't have issues, we never fight, either like you just got married and literally just got back from the Bahamas or wherever you went last week on your honeymoon and everything was awesome, or you're lying, or maybe you don't have problems anymore because you've been married long enough that you've grasped some of these things and you've learned how to fight for your marriage instead of in your marriage, but you have had your fair share of trials. Everybody's going to have trials and difficulties and storms in their marriage. It's just going to happen, and it can turn deadly in the fights. We can speak words of venom. We give up way too easy as a generation. We just do. We give up too easy. We don't know basically what God's intended plan. How do we get through this? God, you gave me her, she's your problem, type of thing. Or just vice versa. The girl's like, man, I don't know why God gave me this idiot. But listen, he's your special idiot. You know what I'm saying? Today I want to talk to you about your special assignment, because that's what your spouse is, your special assignment. Some of you God's trusted you a bunch because your assignment's super special. And so I'm going to start off with a passage of Scripture that a lot of people wouldn't ever think that it applies to marriage, and some of it's going to seem weird, and especially whenever it gets to the part that we're going to talk about, it says something about circumcision, and you're like, how in the world does that apply to my marriage? It doesn't, but we're just going to read the Scripture anyways. It's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, starting in verse 17. Paul is speaking to a church family that's having issues. There's tons of different issues going on. Now, it's not like a one-size-fits-all issue. And this is the way it is in your marriage too. Each of your situations has its own little unique quirks to it. And so you have a special situation going on, and Paul is writing to these situations. He says, each of you should continue to live in whatever situation the Lord has placed you. So you're looking at your spouse and you're going, oh, my spouse is definitely a situation. He's definitely a situation. And you remain as you were when God first called you. This is my rule for all the churches. For instance, a man who was circumcised before he became a believer should not try to reverse that. I'm not sure how that's possible. Maybe super glue or something. I don't. And the man who was uncircumcised when he became a believer should not be circumcised now. What was happening? I'll just speak to this because I think it's interesting. Instance was going on whenever Jesus came. He brought the new covenant. The old covenant was like men once to belong to God, the Jews, they all got circumcised, and that was part of the covenant, knowing that they belonged to the Lord. Well, Jesus came, set up the new covenant, and its relationship with Jesus was what it was. And so we had a lot of Jews that believed in Jesus, but they became elders in the churches, And so what was happening was a lot of times, I don't know if these guys were just mad because they had to get circumcised whenever they were kids, but they were saying that it was a requirement for the new converts, the Gentiles that weren't Jews before, to get circumcised to belong to Christ. Now, see, we have an ownership class coming up today at 1:30, right? And if you're not an owner of this church or a member, that's what we call our members. Reason we call them owners because members have rights and owners have responsibilities. But if you were trying, let me promise you what one of our requirements is not. Circumcision. Thank God for that. Paul was sitting there speaking to these guys in church and saying, guys, let me tell you, I think I'm clued into a little bit as to why church membership is dropping. Because you're telling them, hey, join, you can belong to Jesus, let me get my pocket knife. And it's not working out so good. It says, for it makes no difference whether or not a man's been circumcised. The important thing is to keep God's commandments. Yes, each of you should remain, he keeps repeating this, each of you should remain as you were when God called you. Are you a slave? Well, don't let that worry you. But if you get the chance to be free, you should take that. And remember, if you were a slave when the Lord called you, you're now free in the Lord. And if you were free when the Lord called you, you're now a slave of Christ. But when the Lord called you, whenever the Lord set you free, this is what Paul's talking about. However you are, like then, whatever situation you're in, stick with it. You're okay. God paid a high price for you, so you don't have to be enslaved by the world. And he repeats it. Each of you, dear brothers and sisters, should remain as you were when God first called you. So your marriage is a situation, and it's rough. And if it's good now, just hold on. You're going to have issues. I spoke last week. I said God set up seasons. Sometimes, everything's great. It's hot. Everything's hot and steamy in the marriage, like summertime. I said, enjoy it. Enjoy it. Have a repertoire of how to handle winter, though, because winter will come. And sometimes people freak out when the situation gets cold and frigid, and they don't know how to handle it, and so they just jump ship. But if you're taking notes, write this down. Marriages would be happier and last longer if we would stop trying to change the situation and focus on our calling.
Amen. Yeah.
Marriages would be happier and they would last longer if we would stop trying to change the situation and focus on our calling. So a calling is what were we created? What was the intention of our lives? What is God calling us to? Calling, you see, is a lot different and a lot more than just a good idea. A lot of people have good ideas and they mistake it as their calling. They'll say that it's their calling. And instead, it's just a good idea. So, some Sarah McLachlan commercial played one night, pulled at your heartstrings, you shed a tear, and you say, I believe the Lord's calling me to save puppies. It could have just been a lonely night, a bad burrito, and Sarah McLachlan. Those three things together will make you feel crazy. But in your marriage, if you're married and you're in Christ, you have a calling in your marriage. There's specific things that we are called to in marriage. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 6 practical things. If you're in Christ, this is what you're called to in your marriage. Number 1, I am called to carry your burdens. I am called to carry your burdens. Not add to your burdens. Say, well, how do you add to your spouse's burdens? Well, one of the most popular ways or easiest ways to do it is you keep score. If you're keeping score in your marriage, you're adding burdens to your spouse. Life's difficult, guys, and we all make mistakes. Your spouse makes mistakes. You can't be keeping score. You're called to carry your the burdens for your spouse. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 and 5, verse 2 says, share each other's burden, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Share each other's burdens. Then in verse 5, he says, for we're each responsible for our own conduct. Help carry your spouse's burdens, but don't enable them in destructive and dangerous behavior. Each person, listen, I know this sounds crazy, but one day, regardless of what you believe, you can be on fire for God, giving your life to Jesus. You could be Muslim, you could be atheist, you could be agnostic, you could be all of these things. Regardless of what you believe, one day, you'll stand before the Lord and give an account. You know who won't be there? Your mama, your daddy, your pastor, or your spouse. You're responsible for your own conduct when you come before the Lord. Now, men, there is a little added pressure to you. If you're in Christ Jesus, you're recognized as the priest of your home. But we are called to carry each other's burdens. In your marriage, you are absolutely called to carry your spouse's burdens. The second thing you're called to in marriage is this: assume the best. I am called to assume the best about my spouse. Proverbs 19:11 says, sensible people control their temper, and they earn respect by overlooking wrongs. What if we applied this in our marriage? Sensible. How many times in our marriage, whenever a fight breaks out, the last thing we are is sensible? Last thing we're doing is controlling our temper. We're just trying to control the aim of the dishes that we're chucking at the other person. You know what I'm saying? So the reason that we get upset and we lose tempers in marriage is because somewhere down the line we have stopped assuming the best about our spouse. We're actually the opposite of that. We start imagining things. Something will happen, and we'll start imagining as to why the other person did that. If your spouse does something that upsets you, you'll let it fester and you'll lose your temper and you'll be crazy and psychotic in your mind and stuff, and you start assuming all the bad things about it. You start assuming their motives. Let me give you an example of this in our marriage. I don't think it's a problem per se. My wife disagrees with that very strongly. That's me, and the way that I like. Sometimes in life, you just got to get out of some clothes. You know what I'm saying? You got to change into something more comfortable. Like I'm gonna, when I go home later, I'm going to get in. We call them, hey, let's get in our comfies. And so we're getting in a pair of shorts or sweatpants or something like that. Or maybe I've been out working in the yard or whatever, and I'm coming in. Listen, whenever I take off my clothes, it's an event. All right, it's not like a specific activity. I walk to conserve time, I believe. I just start kicking off stuff as I'm walking. And so there's like this trail of clothes. This drives my wife crazy, and it doesn't matter where it is. A lot of times it's usually as soon as I hit the bathroom, clothes are coming off, and I'm walking towards a new set of clothes. And so it's just a trail of it. Well, Kinsey, those drives her nuts, I guess, apparently, for some crazy reason. So she would start, she has a hamper for me. Says, Heath, this is your hamper. Like, she sits down like I'm a puppy, you know. All right, this is your hamper. This is where your clothes go, and this, that, and the other. I'm like, I just don't get it, I guess. I don't think anything about it. And so this used to cause huge fights. She would blow up at me, lose temper. And listen, here's the reason why. We were on different pages. I never once thought to myself, first of all, I don't think that much. But I never thought, hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw my clothes all over the place just to take Kinsey off. Thought never crossed my mind. It never did cross my mind. And so we had this conversation one time. I said, baby, I don't know. I have an issue, I guess, with that. And obviously you have an issue with that. And so let me tell you something. I'll try. But let's not destroy everything over some clothes, you know. And we both agreed to that. I said, hey, whenever I do this, just know that I'm not doing it to make you mad. But instead of yelling at me, why don't you just ask me if I'll pick up my clothes? And I'll be more than happy to, because I just don't think. I'm a dude, first of all. And so that's what she does now. She'll Whether or not, shoot, who knows me? I might get out of the car and there might be clothes strung on the deck, to get up to the house. But she'll find me. Sometimes it's several times a day, and she'll say, "Hey, baby, hey, when you get a chance, as soon as you get a moment," this is how she handles it. When you get a moment, "Hey, would you pick up your clothes? Notice it was here, and there. And would you please put it in the hamper for me?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'll get it." And listen, it's a non-issue. But whenever we don't assume the best about our spouses, every little thing that they do, we start letting our minds play tricks on us that they are purposefully doing this to destroy our lives. And we've got to stop. So in your marriage, you are called to carry each other's burdens and assume the best about your spouse. The third thing, I am called to live with contentment. I am called to live with contentment in all areas of our lives. You know what destroys contentment? Comparison kills contentment. Comparison kills contentment. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a vehicle. It's totally paid off. You liked it when you got it, but honestly, just over the years, it's a hoopty. Like it's a ride. You know what I'm saying? And listen, you are fine with that for a long time until something else caught your eye somewhere. You said, "Well, this person has that, or I would like to have that car." And then you start comparing that car to your hoopty. And so you stop living with contentment of what you have, and so you'll go out and literally take on a ton of debt to try to get a new vehicle, so just because you're not content anymore because you've compared. Whenever you don't live with contentment in your marriage, it's because somewhere down the line you've compared your marriage or your spouse to another marriage or somebody else. And say, "I wish things would be better if they would only act like this person, or if we were only like them." But comparison will kill contentment. There's a famous verse that a lot of people know. It's Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. We even see, I think Tebow has that on his, little stickers. I think he's a baseball player now or something. But we have these sayings on everything. Philippians 4:13 and stuff. And we look at that verse like, I'm like Superman, and I can do anything I set my mind to and all this. But you got to put it in a little bit let me put that verse into a little bit of context for you as to what it means. Just back it up one verse. In verse 12, Paul says, "I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little." And he says, "This is the secret to it. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." It's a verse about contentment, about being content in your life. You can be content, and you must be content in your marriage. You need to live with contentment. You can do this with Christ. I believe that most, if not, I believe all men at their core are wired this way. I know that I am. But I'm wired and I'm designed with this deep down need or urge to provide. I'm a provider. I provide for my family. I provide for my wife and my kids. Not just financially and security for the future. Like I feel this deep down urge to provide not only that for Kinsey, but her happiness. Like I feel responsible. And men, if you're married, ladies, your man feels that way. Like they're responsible for your happiness. And let me tell you, sometimes that just goes wrong. Kinsey, my wife, is the thermostat of our home. She controls the temperature, not physically. But you ever heard that saying, if mama ain't happy, just move, or whatever it is? It goes something like that. The Bible speaks to this. In Proverbs, there's a couple different versions of it, but it basically says it's living with a nagging, unhappy wife. I mean, it's almost like a dripping faucet on your head, or it's better to live in the desert or on the corner of the roof of the house than to live inside with a quarrelsome wife. When mama's not happy, listen, whenever there's not contentment in the house, when Kenzie's not happy with me for some reason, and I know that's a stretch, like why wouldn't she be happy with me? It speaks to my insecurities. Ladies, let me tell you something about your man, regardless of how tough they are, how well-spoken they are, what good position they have in life or anything. Listen, your man is the most insecure person on the planet. We just are. Sorry, guys, but we're just insecure. I'm super insecure. And then whenever my wife is not happy, I feel like a complete failure in providing happiness to her. And I've always been insecure about not living up to other people's standards. And this is hard to explain, but emotionally, that sends me into a tailspin too. And then it just goes chaotic from there. And then something that could have been simple in the house has turned into this huge bonfire. And the reason is because, ladies, if you're not happy and it's because of us, it's speaking to our innermost insecurities. Philippians 4:8 says this, back it up a few verses. It says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what's true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise." This is the key to contentment in life. Because regardless of how bad the situation can get, we've had bad times. But all I have to do, you ever heard your grandma say, just count your blessings? Stop, count your blessings. And when you do that, you realize that life's good. Life's pretty good. Because I just got to look at it and go, me and my wife have been married almost 15 years. We have 4 incredible kids. We've built a family, we've built a home, we've built a life with each other. We belong to an incredible group that's our church family. We have a roof over our heads. None of us are hungry, due to we can't have food. Life's good. You need to learn. You're called to live with contentment in your marriage. The 4th thing that you're called to live with is let God be God. In my marriage, I am called to let God be God. This is a huge one. Philippians 2:8 and 9 says, talking about Jesus. Jesus humbled himself in obedience to God, and he died a criminal's death on a cross. Therefore, God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name that's above all other names, the name of Jesus. Listen, you didn't do any of those things. You're not God. Stop playing God in your marriage. You are not. Quit trying to straighten out your spouse. And let God start doing that. Let me tell you something. He is really good at it. He knows your spouse better than you know your spouse. He created him. There was a time, and I say this with permission, there was a time early on in our marriage that, look, she was spiritually in love with Jesus. I didn't want anything to do with him. I had knowledge of it and read. It affected the way that I lived, too. I didn't take marriage that serious. Really, whenever I got married to Kenzie, I always had this thing in my head that, one day she'll find something wrong with me and leave me anyways. And so I was like a married guy living as basically a single guy. Our house was chaotic. And then for a while, all Kenzie wanted to do, women have this unique thing, they want to fix their spouse. Like, most women really shouldn't get married. They should just volunteer at an animal shelter. And listen, and then one day she just says, I can't do this anymore. And she never gave up on me, but she gave up on trying to fix me. God cannot fix your spouse. God cannot put his hands on your spouse if your hands are on him. Stop trying to fix him and let him do what he is best at. The fifth thing you're called to in a marriage is, I am called to encourage your strengths. Encourage your strengths. So if you were grading your spouse like a teacher and you're giving them a report card, listen, focus on the things that your spouse is getting A's and B's in. And stop pointing out all the D's and especially the F's. Encourage the strengths because, listen, what you feed flourishes. What you feed flourishes. Kinsey is really good at, I'll be really honest, like, I was trying really hard and struggling, like maybe I am now, like the 9 o'clock experience. Listen, they need to get saved, all right? Don't tell them I said that. But it's like glazed over look. Is like I was struggling. I was like, man, I suck. This is horrible. And I got off the stage. Listen, I do it all the time. And sometimes you guys make me feel that way too. And listen, I could totally bomb a message. It happens. And I feel like I've done horrible. But then every time that I walk off the stage, like regardless of what happened, like a while ago, I got off and I go, man, that sucked. I really felt like that was a horrible message. And she goes, baby, you did great. Every time I got saved, she goes, that's the best message ever. I was like, you're smoking crack again. And I'm just kidding. We got her over all that. And anyways, now here's what she tells, she's like super encouraging. Like other people can tell me I did great, but unless it's something about my wife telling me, she says, baby, they did great. And I go, well, everybody looked like there's this. She goes, listen, the problem's not you, it's them. And I was like, yeah, y'all the problem. Go. And then I was like, I'm ready. Hey, bring on the 10:30, and I'm ready to do it all over again. But we've experienced the opposite of this too. How many people in here, like if you've been here for a little bit, just seriously, by a show of hands, don't be embarrassed, how many know that I'm highly capable of saying very dumb things up here? Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's just the truth. Sometimes I make mistakes. And sometimes I say things like, words leave my mouth, I'm just like, trying to shove them back in, get all my thought vomit choked back down, And so sometimes I say dumb things, and my wife used to, she doesn't do it near as often anymore, but like sometimes I'd say things that was dumb. Everybody can agree that it's dumb, but she would overreact like in a negative way. Seriously, sometimes we'd be up here, like the whole room would be like just cool with it or whatever, and she'd be up here, oh my gosh, and it would throw me off. Like I would get discouraged. I'm like, man, oh my gosh, she thinks I suck, and it would just throw me off. And so we talked about that, and we both really try hard to encourage each other's strengths. It's amazingly, I become amazingly insecure whenever my spouse reacts negatively. And ladies, let me tell you something about your man. You know that you can trick your man into believing that he's incredible? That's your superpower. You have that ability. You have the ability to trick your man into thinking he's awesome. And so here's what you need to do. Start saying, just find something in his life that he's good at. And listen, between me and you, ladies, even if he's not good at something, make something up. Grasp at straws if you have to. Be like, I need to encourage him. Baby, oh, man. Good job. Look at you tying your shoes all by yourself. And my man. Listen, your man will run through mountains. I'm awesome. And he will accomplish way more if you will encourage his strengths. Guys, listen, never miss an opportunity to tell your lady that you love her. All the time. Don't be one of these buttholes out there that's going, I told you I loved you when I got married to you. If I changed my mind, I'll let you know. No, you're a jerk and an idiot. Don't. And don't fall for the trap. Do I look all right in this? Listen, your answer is yeah. You look amazing. Your body's banging in that outfit, man. Matter of fact, let's just stay home. If you want her to change, just say, babe, I'm thinking about ripping that off of you right now, you know. Trust me. Listen, regardless of what's going on, kids, even if it's on the phone, and it's kind of gross, I think, if other people look at it, but we don't hang up and we don't leave each other's presence without saying these words, I love you. I love you. I don't leave the house ever without giving her a kiss. I just don't. I know, sometimes, listen, I don't get it all the time, but sometimes she gets mad at me. Listen, but she will always say, even if it's, I love you too. Have a great day. Even if she's thinking, I hope you stub your toe on the way out, you know. It's just, you got to encourage each other's strengths. It's, as your spouse, your role, you are the CEO of you should be the CEO of your spouse. Your job as a spouse is the CEO of your spouse. You should be the chief encouragement officer of your spouse. You should be the loudest voice in their life that's the most encouraging. Like, that's your job. Listen, if you would change your mindset, I promise you this. Your spouse is not your project. They're not your project, they're your partner. If you feel like your spouse is your project, let me tell you something. You know, we call it a relationship. Let's look at it like a ship. If you're not encouraging your spouse, your relationship is called the Titanic and you're the captain. You should be the biggest encourager of your spouse because everybody else's voice, listen, your spouse can go out and win the whole world, but if they don't have your approval and your encouragement and feel like they have a partner in life, God says it's not good for people to be alone. We should be each other's partners and not projects. And finally, the last thing is this. You are called to do it anyways. Do it anyways. What I mean by that is everything that you just wrote down and I just listed will not work if you only do it whenever you feel like doing it or whenever they deserve it. Just do it anyways. Listen, you don't want to apologize because most of the argument, or maybe all of it, was their fault. Do it anyways. Do it anyways. People have this issue in church sometimes, I think. Do it anyways. I don't feel like going to church. Do it anyways. I don't feel like apologizing. Do it anyways. I don't care if you feel it. Fake it till you feel it. Don't feel it. Listen, let me promise you, here's what feelings have never done. Feelings never lead. Feelings always follow. If you do it anyways, the feelings will eventually follow. So I don't feel like praising God today. Praise Him anyways. Feelings will follow. I don't feel like encouraging my spouse. I don't feel like helping carry their burden today. I don't do it anyways. Guys, marriages are tough. It's just tough. If you look at these 6 things, and if you will stick with these 6 things, your marriage will be stronger and healthier and it'll last longer than you ever dreamed or imagined. If you look at the first letter of all 6 of those, it spells out the word called. This is what you're called to do in your marriage. Too many marriages people are just giving up too easy. And I just wanted to speak practically, give you practical tools that you can apply right now, even simple start things. I just took away all the excuses like, oh, well, my spouse isn't good at anything. Just make something up, you know what I'm saying? Fake it until you feel it. Figure it out. Like there's this wrong belief going around, and I've wrongly taught this statistic. There was a statistic that came out a couple decades ago saying that, and it was a Barna study, and he's like real big in the church world or whatever, but saying that the divorce rate among Christians is the same inside the church as it is outside the church. 50%. You know what, though? That's a completely false survey, though. Let me tell you why it is. Because if you find out how the study was done, you know, they called up and said, are you married or divorced? And once you answered that question, they'd say, they gave you three options. Are you Muslim, atheist, or Christian? What if you're none of those things? I'm not a Muslim. I don't want to say like I'm an atheist, and I'm a Christian. That's how they got those numbers. That's why it's so skewed. The actual numbers are your marriage is 80% more likely to thrive if you're both Christians and attending church. I mean, you have an exponentially greater chance of staying together if you've got Jesus in your life. We give up too easy. Listen, y'all are you're gonna have fights. Me and Kinsey, we have fights. We're working through stuff too. One of the things that we're doing right now, I just encourage you guys to do this too. Every day, most of our days, we live chaotic lives, and so I'm always away somewhere, and she's always busy with the kids. But every day, regardless if it's through a text message or a letter or verbally, we both are listing things about, I love you because. And it's crazy little things too. You know, she sent me one the other day, I love you because I think you're funny as crap, you know. It's like, you make me laugh, and I know I make her laugh because I do stupid things, you know, a lot, and you can't help but laugh. And so it just encourages, and I tell her all the time, I love you because of this. And it's changing. It's changing the atmosphere. And so I just encourage you guys to do the same. Don't give up. And I also want to say, before we pray and get out of here, is you have that sheet of paper. Listen, if you have specific questions about your marriage that you'd like for me to address, write a question. Listen, this needs to be about your marriage, not about somebody else's. And I'm going to take a week or so, and I'm going to go through all of them, and I'm going to try to build a sermon. I'm going to come back here in a couple weeks, and I'm going to do a sermon addressing these issues. Care very much about you guys. I really do. And I know my wife cares about you. Look, we're your cheerleaders. We believe that no matter how bad the situation may be in your marriage right now, that God can restore it just like that. And He can make it better than new. And so we want to do whatever we can to help you in that. And so please, if you have questions and you're struggling, go ahead and write them down. Hey, maybe you got 30 questions. Just start borrowing your neighbors, you know, and saying like, hey, honey, would you give me that paper? I see that you and your husband are perfect. Just whatever you got to do. And then here in just a moment, we're going to worship God through giving, and you can drop that off in the offering buckets. But would you bow your heads? Let me pray for you.